it's great to be with you all. Thanks so much for joining us. As you know, our presentation today is entitled Climbing the Ladder of Love with Botticelli, Ficino, and the Goddesses. We'll start off though by having a meditation, and I'll get up an image to show you to help us enter into the meditative state. So get yourself prepared for meditation. The presentation today is in the spirit of the latest Rosicrucian Digest on the sacred feminine. I know many of you have been enjoying and appreciating. And a central figure in the history of the sacred feminine is Diotima of Mantinea. And she was an important figure in the Platonic dialogues of the Symposium. In fact, in some ways, it's one of the most profound parts of all of Plato's writings. At the Symposium, there's a discussion at a dinner party on what the meaning of love is. And various men speak of it. But then finally, Plato relates through his teacher Socrates, that Socrates had been initiated by Diotima, a prophetess and priestess who had an expansive understanding and comprehensive understanding of love. This is a sculpture that's actually by Victor Hawley Wagner. It was commissioned by Francis and Professor Whitfield back in 1937, 1936. And it's at the University of Western Australia. It's an inspiring sculpture of a figure from antiquity, one of the great teachers of humanity, one of the leading messengers of light, Diotima. Just take some moments to take it in, and when you're ready, I invite you to close your eyes, and we'll have a period of attunement with the cosmic. And we use the term cosmic. Rosicrucians refer to all natural and spiritual laws back of the cosmos, but also the universal intelligence that underlines and guides our microcosm of the body of the temple, but also the temple of the cosmos. And with your eyes closed, if that's comfortable for you, just take some deep neutral breaths, either holding the inhalation or holding the exhalation. And if you want to prolong the exhalation just a little bit, you'll get even more of the relaxation response, particularly through the vagus nerve in the body. And when we do this with a spiritualized purpose, we'll feel the deeper effect even more. Just enjoy the rhythm of the breath. The music of the body in harmony with the music of the spheres and the music of the divine. The body wishes to relax. The body can function better when it's relaxed, and so can our minds. Just take your time with your breath. You find the mind wandering, just gently and lovingly bring it back with no judgment. It's all part of the process of strengthening our intentional control. And as you're taking those breaths, let us undertake a rite of purification. And we can say together, may the divine essence of the cosmic infuse my being and cleanse me of all impurities of mind and body, that I may enter the celestial sanctum and in tune in pureness and in worthiness. So be it in truth, so mote it be. And as we prepare to ascend to the heights of the celestial sanctum, let us invoke the guidance and the presence of leading lights and masters of the past. And as I say their name, continue to breathe deeply, invigorated by their presence and their guidance deeply connected with the divine within us. Past Grand Master, Jean Goodson. Past Supreme Grand Lodge Officer, Martha Lewis. Past Legate and co-founder, Maybank Stacy. Sora Spiritual, Ella Wheeler Wilcox. Sora Spiritual, Marie Corelli. Resplendent Messenger of the Light, Jane Lead. Courageous Leader in Justice, Donna Beatrice of the Congo. Daughter of the Divine, Rose of Lima. Fervent and victorious Master, Mary of the Incarnation of Quebec. Radiant and wise Master, Teresa of Avila. August Master, Catherine of Siena. Most courageous and holy Knight, the Maid of Orleans, Joan of Arc. Wise and serene Master, Julian of Norwich. Cathar Perfect, Escalarmonde of Foix. Most accomplished Master, shining forth the living sun, Hildegard of Bingen. Most compassionate Master, Mary Magdalene. Daughter of Demeter, priestess and prophetess, Diotima of Mantinea. Most exalted daughter of the heavens, Queen Nefertiti. Demeter, Persephone, Venus, Isis, Magna Mater, be with us in your divine effulgence. Guide us in full harmony with the God within, the Master within, the divine within. Charged and in this presence, now let us rise up over the earth. Depart out from the geographic area where you are the home and dwelling, and start to take in a more expansive view. Beautiful scenes of nature, the great metropolis or urban area where you may live. As we rise into the cosmic, let us ascend the ladder of love. Think of the beauty of the earth, the beauty of the human. Rise up further over the province or state where you live, and think of its laws and principles and the beauty that they have for the proper guidance of the human and conduct of the social order. And rise up higher over the country where you live, and even the continent and the hemisphere, and ultimately look down on the beautiful blue jewel of the earth and have a sense of this great order of laws and principles of nature and feel a love for them. And all these interconnecting loves as we rise up the ladder of love spoken to Socrates by his initiator, Diotima. And let us rise up over the solar system and see the beautiful fiery ball of the sun. And feel a great love for the system and order of the cosmos, exemplified in our solar system. And rise up beyond now our solar system, past other stars of our Milky Way galaxy, in its stupendous law and order of its spiraling arms. And feel a great love for the Milky Way galaxy, our home, and all sentient beings within it. And let us rise right out of the Milky Way galaxy, the great arm, and take in the other galaxies and clusters of galaxies and the nebulae and all the wondrous phenomena of stars, the binary stars, the supernovae, their life cycles from the red giant, the white dwarf, the supernovae, even the associated black holes. Let us race by these with great ease and exhilaration and a feeling of love for the cosmos as a living temple of God. And we rise higher and higher and feel the exhilaration rise faster and faster, but do it with ease. Give it everything you've got within yourself. Give it with all the light and life and love of your being. We'll dwell in passivity when we reach the celestial sanctum. As we rise higher and higher in the cosmos, you may get a sense of the stupendous motion of the cosmos. A sense of it revolving about a great cosmic axis spoken of since in times of antiquity. As you come closer and closer to that great axis, picture its center and speed and zoom towards its center, the very heart of the cosmos. The great dwelling place of the Magna Mater, the mother of the goddesses. The very seat of the absolute and the divine. And we reach that center. Picture it as a temple or inspiring place in nature. And be seated with others, seekers and Rosicrucians, seeking the light in the presence of the spiritual masters we invoked and the goddesses we spoke of. And take some time to fill in the sights and sounds of your celestial sanctum. Maybe incense, fragrance of flowers, or beautiful symbology of stained glass windows. Fill it in, make it real. And when you filled it in, it's vibrating with a spiritualized energy. Just dwell there in peace profound. Be receptive to impressions from the God within. As you breathe and take deeper breaths in a rhythmic fashion. If you find the mind wandering, just come lovingly and gently back to the breath, dwelling in the stillness at this heart of your being, the heart of the cosmos. Now, friars and sorors and participants, before we descend from the heights of the celestial sanctum, let us undertake one more spiritual operation of the Rosicrucian Order Amwork. Having ascended the ladder of love and dwelling at the center of the cosmos, at the center of our being, feeling the celestial love there, let us radiate love and well-being to all sentient beings throughout the cosmos. And in conjunction with the work of the Silent Council, the Council of Solace, our Rosicrucian Order Amwork, let us particularly have in mind those who've petitioned for metaphysical aid at this time, and all frontline and essential workers. Let us radiate love and well-being from this special place within ourselves, the center of our being, the center of the cosmos. Just let the love flow from your heart and mind, healing, making whole all those it reaches. As you let the love flow, you may feel a beautiful tingling sensation in your body, the charging of the life force, the cosmic essence. For as you give, so you shall receive and be healed. Just continue to radiate the love and well-being. Grateful for this opportunity to fill the lost service. And in being grateful, we automatically invoke the law of cosmic attunement, which enables us to even more strongly radiate love and well-being. Thank you for your service, writers and sorors and participants. We'll conclude this work of the Silent Council and the radiation of love and well-being by saying, if it pleases the cosmic, it is done. So be it in truth, so mote it be. And now we'll begin our descent from the heights of the celestial sanctum, enriched and invigorated and reborn in love. Let us descend now past the clusters of the galaxies, past the myriad phenomena of the stars, the binary stars, the supernovae, the pulsars, the quasars, the great beauty of the nebulae and galaxies. Let us finally come to the great spiraling galaxy that is our home, the Milky Way galaxy. Come back in the great spiraling arm. See before us the great order of our solar system, the fiery ball of the sun, beautiful blue jewel of the earth. And come back to the hemisphere where you live on the temple of the earth, the continent, the country, the state or province, the city or local area where you live. Let us say together, may the God of my heart sanctify this attunement of self with the celestial sanctum. So be it in truth, so mote it be. And finally come back to the home where you're seated. And when you're ready, open your eyes. You may wish to stretch. Ready for the work and worship of the day. Thank you. Now, in speaking of climbing the ladder of love, particularly in regard to the celebrated Renaissance artist, Sandro Botticelli, let us think of ourselves as traveling to the wonderful and beautiful city of Florence, with all its red tiled roofs. And we have a high view from one of its hills here off to the magnificent Del Duomo Cathedral. We take in the beautiful sights and sounds and integration with nature. You know, Diotima, the prophetess, seer, priestess, she had a great impact through that dialogue in Plato and helped inspire such leading luminaries as Plotinus, who helped set the stage for mystical philosophy, both in Christianity, but also in other philosophies in the West and even in the East. He lived in Alexandria and was at a great meeting place of spiritual philosophies. Other great figures that Diotima would help influence ultimately were on the left here, Marsilio Ficino and Giovanni Pico della Morando, some of the inspired philosophers, particularly during the 15th century, during the Renaissance in Florence. Ultimately, they'd help pass down and teach Sandro Botticelli here. His full name was Alessandro di Mirano Giovanni Filippi. He was born in 1445 and he lived till May 17th, 1510 in this incarnation. Beside him was another great Florentine of an earlier time period, living from 1265 to 1321. You'll recognize, of course, as Dante Alighieri and his inspired texts, for example, the Divine Comedy. These would be inspiring texts to Botticelli throughout his life. So let's keep that point in mind when we examine his art. This work here, you see a very confident Sandro Botticelli. He's rising in his artistic powers. It's dated from 1475. He's about 30 years of age there. It's actually a detail from a painting he did, the adjuration of the Magi, or the spiritual masters before baby Yeshua, as was common in medieval and Renaissance paintings, sometimes the patrons, even the artists, would put themselves into the painting. The painting we're particularly concentrating on now is called the Primavera, or spring. It's a very large work. I know some of you have been to the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, where it is housed. It's actually vertically, it's actually, whoops, just a moment. It's actually just over 2 meters high. You can picture that. And about 3.14 meters, or about 3 meters across. It's a major large work. If you go to Florence during the height of the tourist season and you go to the Uffizi Gallery, it could be a challenge to even get close to this painting. So many thousands of people wish to see it, even on a daily basis. It's one of the most renowned paintings of the Renaissance, along with, for example, the Last Supper fresco in Milan, painted somewhat later. This painting was done in the period of around 1478, 1482. The Last Supper is being done around 1495 to 1498. It's interesting that past Imperator H. Spencer Lewis, in examining the Last Supper fresco, said he noted there was at least 17 mystical principles in it, but he also had a sense that he hadn't fully fathomed even greater ones. One has a sense of that with the Primavera as well. In a way, the work is an enigma. There's something very unusual going on. Who are all these figures? Why are they moving the way they are? How have they been set out in this pattern? It's interesting in that regard that Giovanni Pico della Morando, one of the leading Neoplatonists of his age, and I've spoken of earlier, one of the teachers in Florence around the time that Botticelli was there, mentions that that divine subjects, such as depicted in this painting, and secret mysteries must not be rashly divulged. All must be covered in enigmatic veils and poetic dissimulation, showing only the crust of the mysteries to the vulgar, while reserving the marrow of the true sense for higher and more perfect spirits. There's a sense in this painting that it was done in that spirit. See, some may look at a painting like the Last Supper, and we have readily the texts of the Gospels, so you can see, okay, that particular story is well described here. Scholars, particularly intensely since the 19th century, have been combing texts from the Renaissance, texts from the ancient times, Greek and Roman, ones that were available from at that time in Florence. Many of them translated the Platonic text, Neoplatonic text, related by Ficino from the Greek into the Latin. What text describes these scenes? And it's a very challenging subject matter. It's one of the most written upon works of art. I'm going to mention one of the main interpretations that you want to have seen on it, but I'm going to give you some more recent scholarly work on this before we finish up to look at some alternatives. Often a main figure described is the goddess figure in the center, typically described as Venus. Above, the iconography, art historians use the term iconography to mean a system or canon of symbolism. Here we see the blinded small male figure with the arrow, Cupid, who's actually the son of Venus. Over here we see the west wind, or Zephyr or Zephyrus, coming in to grab Chloris, who's said to then becomes Flora or spring. The painting tied in with the painting's title, the Primavera. It's set in a sacred grove. You see there's blue in the background, so we have a sense that we're not deep in a forest. There's all figures here that are dancing, described as the three graces. And then Mercury, which has the winged boots, and also is Calcidius here that he's reaching up in. Keep these in mind. This is a typical interpretation of these figures based on some inscriptions from antiquity. To do a painting like this, though, I want to give you a little background of that before we get more into the iconography of the painting and its symbolism. This would be a major undertaking. There would be many preparatory drawings. For example, on the left here, we see another work by Sandro Botticelli, Pallas and the Centaur from 1482, tempera on canvas. And to the right is a preparatory drawing of Pallas or Pallas Athena, the goddess associated with Athens. And you'll notice there's also a grid, because figures would be done in a smaller preparatory sketches. Then they could use the grid to transfer to a grid that's on the large 2 by 3 meter panel that is the Primavera. There was also canons of proportions, or sometimes grids were used. One was the celebrated canon of Polyclitus from the Polyclitus Greek sculptor, that there was a harmonious relations of the parts through harmonic ratios could be associated with music and geometry. You see Botticelli, he started his career as a painter, working on he had to work up to being able to do a painting as sophisticated as the ones that I'm showing to you here now. He started in 1461. He would have been about roughly around 16 years of age for his most serious studies. He was shown to show great promise in art earlier before that. But this is the first time he came with a recognized Renaissance master, Fra Filippo Lippi in Florence. He would take part in the workshop from 1461 on. There would be very detailed training then. You'd learn how to mix the paints. You'd learn how to draw the hands and the bodies. There'd be very a classical way of preparing drawings. They had Greek and Roman art left in ruins in architecture. They'd be examining those closely. They'd be looking at the text from those periods, and they'd be, in a way, rejuvenating or reviving what was deemed that great golden age of the Greek and Roman period. So you'd have this very intensive training. And if an artist was good enough and ambitious enough, they could then move off and leave the master and maybe surpass their master and start their own workshop up, which is what Botticelli did at the time when he was doing his Primavera painting. I want to show you that there's various different parts of the painting to give some sense of it. Is that the central figure we've identified as Venus. That's often said because about 70 years later, The Lives of the Artists, written by Giorgi Vasari, describes this painting and says it's Venus. The challenge is, though, that Vasari often makes mistakes. We know from his descriptions of Botticelli's works and other artists that some of the things he aren't saying because we have other good documentation to say it isn't correct. So it's been raised, is this really Venus? And this has opened the door for other art historians to give interpretations. Also, even the very title Primavera or spring is in question to some extent, because there's a tremendous number of flowers in this painting. Some estimate up to 500. There's over 150 distinct flowers, for example, and then there's many more herbs and spices. And some of those flowers do not bloom in spring. So that's made people wonder a little bit more as well. The central figure here, many people see it and they see Mary in iconography that is associated with the Virgin Mary. In fact, Sandro Botticelli often painted the Virgin Mary. This is, of course, a central figure of a Christian city-state and nation. And here's a work by him. It's actually entitled Madonna and Child Seated Before a Classical Window. I wanted to draw your attention to it. It's very common, not only for Botticelli, but others he learned from, that they would place the Holy Family in the background of an arch or in the background of a rounded apse of a church. So we see that motif that appears to be happening in the painting itself, often remarked on by art historians, in a way setting up the sacred grove as a sacred temple or church-like structure. Another detail I wanted to show you is we have the blindfolded Cupid. He's aiming his arrow, we'll see here, and he's the one of the is a god of earthly attraction and love. You see there, like there's a flaming tip on the arrows associated with the intensity of love. If we go in very close on the figure associated with Flora, you see she has these roses she's distributing out in the painting. Not only does she have this beautiful feminine form, but there's this wondrous various types of flowers that are blooming on her garment. And she has these flowers she's springing out to bring forward the abundance of nature and spring. And you'll notice the beautiful work of the hands that have been associated with Botticelli's early training. One thing to keep in mind, it's a large painting. It would be done as a team effort. It would be part of Botticelli's workshop. He would be guiding the work. He'd be teaching the artists that are working on it, and the program he would be deciding on about who goes where, possibly and most likely working with a learned patron like Marsilio Ficino to work out a symbolic, sacred story for the painting. Another beautiful detail in the painting is actually on Mercury or Hermes' garment. You'll notice there's these inverted flames associated with love. He's also pointing upward his Caldesis here, and it's going up into some clouds. Now, there's been various interpretations. I'll mention one briefly here, that he's helping maintain the beautiful sunlit sacred grove by moving away the clouds. But there's also certain other actions that he's taking part in here. Depending on the story that's thought to be describing Primavera, you'll notice here too, there are oranges, though some have thought golden apples is this particular story from antiquity, but often it's described as an orange grove that also had a symbolism associated with the Medicis that were helping with the patronage of this work. So let's go back, take in the painting again. You'll notice, thinking about just what's happening in it. You know, today often you see a lot of images very quickly, but with a great work of art, it's good to take a lot of time with it, many minutes, even hours, when we'll be enriched by it. You can start to attune with Sandro Botticelli, because he's emulating the cosmic. He's an inspired artist. He'll lead us back to the cosmic, and we'll draw that through the presentation. You notice there's a dynamic action in the painting. If you look where your eye goes in this painting, you'll tend to see that there's a downward movement, an upward movement, but then there's this very equilibrating point in the center. There's this sense of motion down with the Zephyr grabbing Florence. He wants to grab her, and they'd make love with her, indeed dominate her and rape, which will then give form the daughter Flora, bringing about the spring. But there's also a movement upward here that you'll notice with the described as the three graces, but also with their arms in their celestial dance, but also the arm leading up to the work of Mercury here. If we keep going though, we'll notice that this action gives us beautiful movement up, going down and up. Also, as we noted below or before, Cupid's aiming his arrow at the central grace. And we have this equilibrating figure, because I think as you follow your eyes going down and up, it always comes back to the central goddess figure. She noticed that she is actually standing somewhat back. And I'll put a horizontal green line here. In a way, she's overseeing in guiding this action. Further, you'll notice that, here, there's that opening I was mentioning, that is almost like a great halo or aura about her. Part of the her divine presence. With it, you can see like a circular, semicircular form, and the very one to draw your attention to her hand gesture. It's like a benediction, a making sacred that is associated not only with the figure of Mary and the Master Yeshua, but also with Venus and various goddesses of Greek and Roman antiquity. So we've looked at various actions of a dynamic nature in the painting. Let's see a little bit more about what's going on here. Now, we talked about these common identifications here. The three graces, in a way, partition the painting. On one side, you have these three figures. On this side, there's more sort of the worldly and more the beyond the worldly, the celestial on this side, but balanced by the central goddess, but connected through Cupid, through the attraction of the terrestrial with the celestial. You know, many scholars work on the central premise of this painting was commissioned for the July 1482 wedding of Lorenzo di Pier Francesco de' Medici, a cousin of Lorenzo the Magnificent. The Medicis were major bankers in Florence, and through financial means, they had considerable control of Florence, and they were great patrons of the arts. Part of the reason that period was so prosperous was that there's great resources, but there was also forward thinking of encouraging the arts, using well-to-do patrons to support the arts. And as we know from Rosicrucian teachings, when the human has time to reflect, there can be great advancements and gains made just in our own lives if we have time to reflect. So some have thought that Mercury here is actually Lorenzo di Pier Francesco de' Medici. And actually his bride-to-be is Semirandi Appiani here. And some have said, okay, well, this is also not only the Venus figure, but could also be identified as the goddess Semiramis, because Semiramis was known as the queen that was the creator of the famous hanging gardens of Babylon, and one of the wonders of the world. And it was also a goddess who's associated with Queen Semiramis. And the parents would have known that. This was something that was well known in the Middle Ages and during the Renaissance, that if you gave a daughter that name, it would be associated with that queen and goddess. So it's thought that this painting was commissioned as a wedding present, or possibility of postnuptial celebration of that wedding, and that this painting would actually not hang in a temple or a church. It's one of the major. It's actually the first major mythological painting of the Renaissance. But in a bedchamber of the bride and the bridegroom, and particularly the over the bed of Semirandi. Now, this painting may have also been thought to have a certain magical property, and also following the law of suggestion that would help the young couple to give forth birth, just like Chloris, but also that they would be follow the virtues of the graces. One scholar, in looking at these works, identified these graces with Jupiter, Venus, and Sol, that these were the feminine representatives of these figures. Indeed, there's a marriage of the heaven and the heaven of the earth here in the painting. That's the way that you could say the sacred marriage. It's interesting that in an article by past Imperator H. Spencer Lewis, he talks about a mystical understanding of marriage, that it's a uniting of two soul personalities that would mirror that spiritual marriage that we come into in mystical union. later, Karen's going to post some resources about some of the things that I'm speaking to you about in these paintings. Here's another interpretation of this, but there's sort of similar themes that you'll have the central goddess figure here, whether it be identified as Venus or the mother goddess, the Magna Mater, the great mother. One of the identifications of her was Demeter or Demeter or Venus. So the interpretations have a lot of essential things in common. In this interpretation, though, the sacred grove is the hollow veil of Ida, where the Magna Mater, the mother goddess, holds court and rules the cosmos from, and creates the cycles throughout the cosmos. The story here of the abduction of Florence by Sephir, the west wind, is likened to another famous abduction, that of Helen. In fact, the abduction of Helen is referenced here by the abduction of Florence, and also relates to the abduction of Persephone that I'll talk about in a little while. And Hermes here is said to be making a mirage or a double of Helen to take off, who's in one story of the abduction of Helen to Troy, so that Hermes creates a double or a phantom Helen that gets taken off to Troy, not the real Helen. And he saves her in that regard. And there's identification here that Marsilio Ficino made and others during the Renaissance that Botticelli would refer was that Aphrodite, Hera, and Pallas Athena that were associated with three dancing figures in this story associated with the Great Mother, that these three figures would be the earthly or voluptuous life, the active life, and the contemplative life. Ficino talks about those as that's what we're faced in our life. We have to work with these three loves. It's not that the contemplative life is the only one. We have to balance them. As you know, as Rosicrucians, as mystics, we have to work with balance, and then we can have the divine dance and the divine music. Another association with the three graces and these dancing figures of Aphrodite, Hera, and Pallas Athena that Ficino makes is that they represent providence, fate, and freedom. You see, just as sacred texts of the Bible were interpreted on multiple senses or multiple levels, so that was done with the stories of the Greek and Romans that are associated with the pagan mysteries. Here's another interpretation by the Professor Jonathan Klein. He goes as far as to say that the central figure, in fact, is Persephone, and in fact, she's been returned back after coming from Hades. You know, the story of Persephone is the daughter of Demeter. There's a story of rebirth. There's a great article dealing with that in the current Rosicrucian Digest I alluded to, and we'll give you in the chat later the reference for it. And it goes along with that the story of the return of spring, spoken of in the Orphic mysteries and the Orphic hymns. Indeed, in the second hymn to Mercury, it describes the Mercury as a guide of souls, and that he was given that duty, in fact, by Persephone, and that he will guide them from the sacred house of Persephone as a guide through the earth, but also back to their haven. So he's a guide of souls. He would lead mortal souls to the subterranean world, just as Persephone went there out of compassion or out of the necessity for growth and rebirth. We see also now the figure here identified with a hora or spring and the hora or winter. But again, it's sort of this idea is the cycles of nature and moving forth. This idea of, of identifying the figures this way has some merit to it. Because a common methodology of our historians is to look at, what are other artworks going on? What sort of text would have been involved? Part of this is iconography, looking at well-established symbolism, but also is part of what's called iconology, which in some ways is another extended form iconography, where you want to look at the intellectual milieu, what is the cultural milieu, what are people thinking and doing at that time, what is the history, and what are the things going on, wars or reforms and so forth that could have been happening at that time in the study of iconology. We note, though, that as I mentioned, the Florentines did have still some beautiful works of antiquity that they used. Here's one that's a sarcophagus with a scene of the rape of Persephone going on here. You'll notice Mercury takes part in there. So some of the same iconography that's in this Roman sarcophagus dating from around 160, 180 CE is actually in the painting by Botticelli. We also have later work from, this is from 1509, but it does show some of the currency of these ideas from the period. This is from the ceiling of the Palace of Pandolfi, Petrucci in Siena. And here we see depicted Mercury, Cupid, and here the abduction of Persephone. So it's a plausible story that's going on that Jonathan Klein has made. I wanted to show you here another interpretation before we finish up. It's associated with astronomy and astrology, and that the painting depicts in a way that not only the harmony that is within ourselves, the beautiful music of the body, but also the harmony throughout the cosmos. That the three graces were associated with Venus, I should say Jupiter, Venus, and Sol, or the sun. We know that Ficino and persons like Leonardo da Vinci and Botticelli are thinking along these lines. This is the intellectual milieu they're in. He identifies the central figure as Luna, the moon goddess, particularly through this moon-like semicircle behind her, but also through other identifications in the painting, keeping still with Chloris, Zephyr, and the nymphs. Now, these stories still lead us back, though, that we have the central goddess figure that equilibrates the painting here. We have the earthly forms of love, the celestial forms of love and virtue. In a way, it's a harmoniously united work. I want to draw together a little more associated back with Diotima and the ladder of love. You know, I made reference to her before, and this dialogue Botticelli and Leonardo and Ficino and their teachers know about. I think of climbing a ladder that Diotima spoke of. And she mentions the quoted here in the sculpture. Then at last the human may beheld the beauty with the eye of the mind and will be able to bring forth not mere images of what is good for the human, but realities. We could say actualities in the Rosicrucian tradition. Would that not be ignoble life, Socrates? So she's teaching Socrates in a way she's one of the great teachers of the Western period. One thing that's very remarkable about the language that she uses, or given to her use through Plato, is the language and imagery of the Eleusinian mysteries. So the idea of the Persephone going down and being reborn through her descent to Hades and rising back up to the upper lands, that also occurs in the Orphic hymns. And so it occurs in the Orphic mysteries and the Eleusinian mysteries. So Diotima is reasonably thought of as the priestess and prophetess of the Eleusinian mysteries. She talks in that dialogue about there's an ascent through forms of love, but there's not that one love is valued as superior. They're all of value, but they're increasingly expansive. There's the terrestrial love that's procreative that we saw associated with the figure that Flora appeared pregnant, and even the Venus figure appears pregnant, the procreation of nature, but also the romantic love that's associated with Cupid. And then often people experience in their own lives, romantic love draws them up into God and inspire and thinks of heavenly music and heavenly things and how wonderful life can be when one's in love with another. But she also speaks of the laws of governance and how the society is governed, that is a form of love and how that's set up. But also the laws of nature as we rise up in the ladder is that it's there's a stupendous harmony and order as we meditated, sensing those laws of the cosmos. We have a love for the laws, but also there's a celestial love that in development of virtues, 7 virtues and beyond, as the human then rises further into the celestial love and it is one with the magna mater or one with the divine. But these are all to be balanced in a form of balanced love, which in the Rosicrucian tradition we call self-mastery or mastery. And they develop compassion and harmonium, and not looking down on any of the other loves, but we have able to be healthy and whole by working with all these loves that are increasingly expansive in the way the ladder returns back and comes up again, and we live in balance on it. So let's sum up now. In terms of love, we can look at the painting as representing these different forms of love, from the terrestrial romantic, the Cupid who binds or the terrestrial with the celestial, the worldly with the celestial or divine, but also the laws of nature that are depicted in this beautiful scene of nature here, the allegory of the sacred grove, but also the laws governance, because there's the allegory of the proper governance of Florence through this painting and its patrons, the Medicis. There's a celestial love associated with the virtues of the 3 graces, or these 3 goddesses that work with the Venus. And then we have the celestial of the ascendant, thought of here of Mercury or Hermes reaching up with his caduceus to reach in and bring back the veils, the true nature of the laws and principles. They're no longer an enigma, wondering about what's the purpose in life, but bringing back, opening up the veil here. You know, Ficino actually talks about there being 2 Venuses, the one of the world and the world soul, who's first heavenly, and then there's the vulgar one, what he calls vulgar. It's the ones that they must unite, and that the earthly Venus bring forth beauty and procreation through matter, and then the latter then works towards the rising up into the heavenly, and there's an underlying unity on them. We see that then here as this motion through the painting from the terrestrial through to the celestial. In fact, it's then mediated by the central figure here of the Venus or the magna mater. Ultimately, we can look at that in terms of our Rosicrucian laws and principles that can think of celestial love and terrestrial love being perfectly balanced in the balanced love or self-mastery of the central figure here. In a way, when we look at this painting, we sort of see our life, or we see the drama and allegory of life. Botticelli was greatly taken with Dante's Divine Comedy. His ideas about the painting relate to the Divine Comedy and that great passage in life. In a way, he was trying to create in his own medium, rather than a literary one, in a artistic one, a painting one, something equivalent to Dante's Divine Comedy and the great passage in life that we go through. We see in it here that in the perfect blend of light, which is understanding, and life, vitality, we have love in a sustained way. And we say the painting in that way is no longer a great enigma. In a way, we've been able to pull apart the veil and come into its deeper understanding of the painting. And as we grow and learn, the painting will reveal even more to us. Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed this journey, climbing the ladder of love with Botticelli, Ficino, and the goddesses on the mystical path, on the way to mystical union. Thank you.